What if the path you're avoiding is actually the one that leads to your purpose? Why do we resist things that don't match our expectations of success? And what if true greatness looks nothing like what you've been chasing? There are moments in life when everything seems to be moving forward, when progress feels visible, when direction appears clear. You begin to build expectations, you imagine outcomes, you start forming a picture of what success will look like. And most of the time, that picture is shaped by something very human. Victory without struggle, recognition without sacrifice, elevation without cost. It feels natural to think this way. After all, who chooses difficulty when ease is available? Who willingly walks towards something that looks like loss instead of gain? But what if that thinking is incomplete? Imagine being in a moment where everything is building towards something significant. You've seen powerful things happen, you've witnessed change, you've experienced moments that feel extraordinary, and then suddenly, the message shifts. Instead of talking about victory, the focus turns to something unexpected: suffering, rejection, loss. Not in vague terms, but clearly, directly, a prediction of something difficult ahead. This is not what anyone wants to hear, because it doesn't match the expectation, it doesn't align with the vision that has been built in the mind. And so the natural response is confusion. Why would this happen? How could something so promising lead to something so painful? What does this mean for everything we thought was coming? These questions are real, because when reality doesn't match expectation, tension is created, and that tension forces a decision. Do you adjust your understanding, or do you resist what you're hearing? In many cases, people choose to ignore what doesn't make sense. They move forward as if it wasn't said. They focus on what feels better, what sounds more hopeful, what aligns with their desired outcome. And in doing so, they miss something important, because the message was not meant to confuse, it was meant to prepare. Preparation doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always sound encouraging, but it is necessary, because without it, when difficulty comes, it feels unexpected, overwhelming, unfair. But when you are prepared, even if you don't fully understand, you are not completely shaken. There is also something deeper happening in this moment. While the message is being shared, something else is happening in the background. A different conversation. Not about sacrifice, not about purpose, but about status. Who is greater? Who matters more? Who holds the highest position? This contrast is striking. On one side, a message about humility, sacrifice, and difficulty. On the other, a focus on comparison, importance, and recognition. And this reveals something about human nature, that even when we are close to something meaningful, we can still be distracted by what feels important to us. We can hear the message, but not fully absorb it. We can be present, but not fully understand. And this happens more often than we realize, because we tend to filter everything through our own perspective, our own desires, our own expectations. So instead of receiving the message as it is, we reshape it into what we want it to be. But truth does not change based on preference. It remains, and eventually it requires attention. This is where correction comes in, not as punishment but as guidance, a redirection of focus, from status to humility, from comparison to purpose. And the way this is done is simple but powerful. A child is brought forward, not someone strong, not someone influential, not someone recognized for achievement, but someone small, someone overlooked, someone without status. And this becomes the example, this becomes the standard. Because greatness in this perspective is not about being above others, it is about how you receive, how you treat, how you value those who are often ignored. This challenges everything, because it flips the definition of greatness, from elevation to humility, from being served to serving, from being recognized to recognizing others. And this is difficult to accept, because it goes against instinct, against culture, against the natural desire to rise, to be seen, to be acknowledged. But here's the truth. What looks like greatness on the outside is not always greatness on the inside. And what appears small, unnoticed, or insignificant may carry more value than we realize. There is also something important about timing. This message is given before the difficult moment arrives, before the prediction becomes reality, because understanding needs to come before experience. Otherwise, the experience becomes overwhelming. But even with the message, understanding is not immediate. There is still confusion, still uncertainty, still a lack of clarity. And that's okay. Because understanding often comes in layers. You hear something first, you experience something later, and then, looking back, everything begins to make sense. This is how growth works. Not instant, not complete, but progressive. Developing over time, through both learning and experience. There is also a deeper lesson about leadership. Because many people want to lead, to influence, to be in a position of importance. But leadership in this context looks different. It is not about control, not about power, but about responsibility, about caring for others, about placing value where others may not. And this requires a different mindset, a shift from self-focus to others-focus, from how do I rise to how do I serve. And this shift is not easy, because it requires letting go of something, the need for recognition, the desire for status, the pursuit of being seen as important. But what you gain in return is something deeper, a sense of purpose, a clarity of direction, a strength that is not dependent on external validation. And this kind of strength lasts. It is not shaken by comparison, not affected by position, not dependent on outcome, because it is rooted in something more stable. There is also a connection between the two parts of this moment, the prediction of difficulty and the lesson on humility. They are not separate, they are connected. Because walking a path that includes sacrifice requires humility. It requires letting go of personal expectations, of control, of the need to define the outcome, and trusting that there is purpose even in what feels difficult. This is where many people struggle, because they want purpose without pain, meaning without challenge, growth without discomfort. But often those things are connected. Not because difficulty is the goal, but because it shapes something within. It builds resilience, strength, depth, and without those things, growth remains shallow. So the question becomes personal. What are you chasing? Recognition, status, comfort, and what are you avoiding? Difficulty, sacrifice, uncertainty, because sometimes the very thing you are avoiding is the path to something greater. Not greater in the way you imagined, but greater in a deeper, more lasting way. A way that changes not just your situation, but who you are. And that kind of change matters. More than position, more than recognition, more than temporary success, because it shapes your character, your perspective, your ability to handle what comes next. So don't ignore the messages that challenge you. Don't avoid the truths that don't match your expectations, because they may be preparing you, positioning you, strengthening you for something ahead, even if you don't fully understand it yet. And when that moment comes, when things don't go as planned, when difficulty appears, you won't be completely unprepared. You will remember, you will recognize, and you will respond differently, not with confusion alone, but with awareness, with a sense that there is more happening than what you see, and that awareness will carry you through, because it connects you to something deeper, something that goes beyond immediate outcomes, beyond temporary circumstances, into something lasting, something that shapes not just what you do, but who you become. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Your support helps spread this message of purpose and humility to more people. And be sure to watch the full video to go deeper into this powerful perspective.